oh yeah, I really don't want to be a lawyer. This little voice in the back of my head in about second year that said, oh man, imagine going to, and I say no disrespect to people who are doing law, but I would go to, I was on Law Soc, I'd go to law firm offices and we'd do, we'd have sessions with these big law firms, and I just would arrive with this feeling of a pit in my stomach. And I'd have conversations and I'd go, I just felt like I was always being really fake as to oh yeah, I'm interested in this. I knew that feeling in my stomach, I knew that then, that it wasn't the right thing for me. And I kind of just kept going because I wasn't sure what else to do. And so when the earthquakes happened, as I said, I had an amazing time on campus. And what I realized was that actually this was an incredible place to be. I already knew that. But I really wanted to stay and find a way to continue being part of this community in some form. And the university was in a real push-pull point, right? It was hemorrhaging staff and students. The ground was still shaking, and we forget that all of the time, but the ground was still shaking. We'd be here, we'd move. We'd be here, we'd move. It would, forestry was the only building that was open for a while. We were doing lectures in tents. It was all of this sort of stuff. And so it was interesting because it was well, how do you create an environment that still is actually as magic as what we know it can be? And so I thought, oh, well, you know what I'd be interested in? Maybe a good way to give back to this is to stand for the Students' Association, because this feels like that's a good way to try and help add value to students who are the lifeblood of this place. I have a few friends who said, don't do it, you'll never get elected, you're a girl. I was the first girl in quite a long time to put my name forward. And typically girls didn't stand for president. It was a cool thing in a room, in an environment full of vastly intellectual, super progressive people, but they still kind of had that feedback that you wouldn't get elected. Got elected, did some interesting things, got re-elected because we weren't finished doing the interesting things. So if you've used the dental scheme, we set the dental scheme up, we created the student space in the undercroft. There's a whole lot of stuff that kind of happened as a result of the earthquake, which is really cool to see that it's just part of what's accepted now on campus, which just didn't exist because literally half of campus was closed. There was no student space because the UCSA building was out of action and so on. We also brought Macklemore to New Zealand, which was kind of the coolest thing I think I've ever done in my life. Anyway, so we did all of these things, and kind of I finished and went, okay. And everyone said, oh, well, you're going to go be a lawyer now because you've done 2 years here. You've been at university for 7 years in total, 5 years degree, 2 years UCSA. You should probably go and get a real job. And I went, oh, I don't know what that feels like. And that feeling of dread came back. And I went, oh, I should go and be a lawyer. And I interviewed for a couple of positions because I knew some people by this point because I've been working with different law firms. And I kind of went and had some conversations. And every time I had to call someone about a job, I went, oh, I just don't want to do it. And then a friend of mine called me because my friends knew I did profs and they knew. So I did that, and I kind of was like, oh. And a friend called me and was like, look, I've got you an interview. I've got you an interview. It's in Wellington. It's with government. It's really high up. Come up. We're going to interview you, and it's going to be great. And I went, oh, okay. I should probably go get a real job. So I went to Wellington. And I sat in this room. I had to do a writing test. It was super easy because this is the skills thing, right? So it was like, hey, you've got 40 minutes to write the thing. I was like, I'm done in 20, and now what do I do for the next 20 minutes? And I listened to the conversations of the people in the room. And I went and had coffee with them afterwards, and I did this thing, and I got in the cab, and I left to go back to the airport. And I called my partner, and I burst into tears and was like, that was horrible. And again, it was like this pit was just back in my stomach, and I was like, I don't want to take the job. And he was like, well, you haven't been offered it yet, so just calm down. It's quite a big deal. You've not been offered it. You're just actually leaving the interview, so just come home, you'll be fine. And so I got offered the job, and I hung up the phone. At this point, I've facing student loan repayments, and I'd bought a house, and I was sitting here on my front deck and get this phone call and be like, well, you can come and do this job in Wellington. And I got off the phone and burst into tears and was like, oh my God. And so went through this big turmoil as to well, actually, what does that mean in terms of that feeling? And so despite all of my friends, families, partners, everyone's better judgment, I said, thank you very much, but I'm just not going to take that. And so I started by just I looked at my network. At this point, I knew quite a few people around Christchurch. I looked at what, what I was going to, and I was like, okay, well, I clearly don't want to follow the pathway of being a lawyer. What have I got? What am I good at? I'm good at bringing people together. I'm good at telling stories. I think I can get people to like give money or to support causes, actually more important than just giving money. I can tell people about things that I'm passionate about. I can create that sense where people go, yeah, I care about that, or that's an issue. And they come on board and they either want to give money or they want to, join this or they want to get involved. And I was like, okay, well maybe what I am is actually able to bring people together. And so a friend of mine, the guy that just dropped me off before, was trying to bring public bike share to Christchurch. So this is the end of 2014, so it's a few years ago. And this was the first time anything like this had been done in New Zealand, but it was also the first time that anyone had gone out to try and do this in a public sense, rather than actually having a private local government provider bring the bikes in. And he was like, I'm going to crowdfund to bring the bikes to Christchurch. And I was like, do you want a hand? He said, no, it's okay. I've got this. It's fine. About 3 days later, he was like, Erin, I don't have this. Can you help? And I was like, oh my God. And so I started helping him bring this crowdfunding campaign together. And it was the most fun I've ever had. It was unpaid, it was stressful, we spent money to make money, but ultimately we raised $50,000 from the people of Christchurch to bring public bikes to Christchurch for free for the first half hour. We had Spark on board, and they'd said, look, we'll front this, but we need you to raise this. And you can't tell anyone you've got us on board until you raise the money. And so we did. It was very cool. And we became the first city in the world to publicly crowdfund a bike share scheme. And what it was for me was this point of that was this aha moment, because I went, this is literally the combination of everything I've learned through Student Volunteer Army, through clubs on campus, through my law degree, like the ability to like quickly read very long and boring documents, but the ability to do all of this. And it was like, this is my thing. Like, this is what I love doing. And it was like, well, how on earth do you turn that into a job? Like if you've found that, which is in itself a privilege, because actually it's really hard sometimes to know what you love and what you're most passionate about. But I'd found that, I went, well, what do I do? And so I thought, well, let's test that skill set with different people. And so I went out to anyone I'd ever met, basically, and said, I really like doing this. Like, can I help you with something? Can I be of assistance? And I had sort of enough connections or people I'd met. I had coffee with anyone who would give me 20 minutes and said, can I help you with something? Is there a problem you've got in your organisation that you're trying to solve? And a few people, actually quite a few, said, yeah, there is actually. Oh, I'm struggling with this. Or I don't know if you can, this might be totally out of your area of expertise. I'm like, I don't think I've got any expertise, but sure, I'll say yes and figure it out later. And so we started saying yes to everything. And out of that, basically, in about mid-2015, I looked around, we had the same group of people that I'd been working with, because I was like, oh, Rob's really good at the technical side of things. Joel's the graphic designer and artist. We've got an intern from UC helping us on this project. And I looked around and went, I've reverse engineered a business. So whereas I go and talk to the UCE crew, who I adore, and I go and talk to them and everyone says, oh, we go out to start a business and you create a beautiful brand and then you get some business cards and then you go out and start to sell your services. We were sold out. We had no more space. We were absolutely frenetically working, but we had no business. We had no brand. We had nothing except basically it was like Erin and a group of her mates doing some stuff. And so what we, at that point, was okay, line in the sand, we'll create a business around this. It's called Narrative, and that's my business and my first baby. That still runs today. We've been in business for almost, it'll be 4 years in this coming November. We've worked with over 100 different clients, and we only work with people who are values-driven organisations. So we primarily work with startups and social enterprises, but we've worked with universities. We're doing some work with the UCSA, Television New Zealand, Social Enterprise World Forum, but then also on kick-ass crowdfunding campaigns. So Indigo and Iris, Adaptify, people who are really kind of changing the game in their own industry as well. So it's a pretty interesting business model because we're not any one thing to any people, like any one person. But what we've built, that's those same fundamental values that we started with in 2014, which was me saying to Rob, do you need a hand? Can I help? And can I help solve some problems? That's still the ethos that we operate by today. We've never advertised. I've never gone out to market what we do. And we've always had enough work, and we've got a team of 8 of us now, and we just continue on, and this year we're trying to do more of the big projects that we're really passionate about, because we've done a lot of great client work, and we said, okay, what are the things that we really care about? So this year we've launched our own. So we set up the Christchurch Food Chase last year. We're doing a massive fundraiser with the Child Cancer Foundation this year, and we're picking issues that we're really passionate about, that we want to basically create something around. So that's kind of where we've got to. So I said before, I don't feel like I've got it all figured out in terms of the path or the preparedness, and I'm under no illusion that I've been highly privileged in the ability to take some of these risks along the way. But I think the fundamental thing that's stuck with us is that we add value, and when we don't know necessarily how to do it, we ask the question, how can we help you, or what problems are you trying to solve? And we are always prepared to put generosity first. And that is fundamental to my business. And it's interesting because when people go out there to try and start a business, if you can help people solve problems or help people feel better or fix something, actually that's the most natural way of marketing yourself that you'll ever find. And so that's where we've got to today. I also have half a dozen governance roles that I sit on as well, which is interesting because there's lots of different pieces to that, which has been really useful. But that's all straight through from just that networking piece, and starts again from being willing to ask the question. And I think I'm super passionate about how we increase diversity of companies, of boards, of representation across every level. But I also think that particularly as young people, when we go into some of these roles, and what I found, I often walk into rooms, sometimes the question is, well, what brings you here, or how are you qualified to be here? Being willing to say, I don't know everything, I'm going to figure it out, but I'm also going to figure out how to add value, that generosity has served us, or me personally, but also just so well throughout different pieces. And that's, I guess, probably underlines my entire networking philosophy, is that actually people remember how you make them feel. They might not remember an exact conversation, but if they feel like you've done something useful for them, and it came from a genuine and authentic place, then that's absolutely just pivotal. But I'm also going to say that, because that sort of, I guess, starts to talk a little bit about some of the lack of path and the lack of structure that I've had personally. My mum still doesn't know what I do, so that's probably a really fundamental thing to say. If that all sounds really exciting, your mother will still introduce you at parties and goes, "This is Erin, she does some stuff," and run away. That's what my mum still does, which is really great as well. I think my partner's in a bit of the same boat. But I think that the interesting thing is that the risk factor, because I know what I love doing, and I look for that in pieces. And if I'm ever feeling like the business isn't quite working well enough, it's about dialing back into going, okay, actually, are we working on big issues, or are we getting caught up in minutiae? Are we playing with that? That's actually, even though that feels like the scarier piece, we've turned down work, right? Because I've sat there with very lucrative, well-paying clients, and sat there and gone, you don't pass the front page test. Or if I stand up and talk to a group of students and say, we work with these clients, and then they say, well, actually, you worked with this person, I can't hand on my heart say that yes, that's the right thing. So that's probably the scariest point from a risk perspective. If someone's got a contract that could pay your wage bill for the next 3 months, but you say no to them, that feels scary. But equally, it means that by acting with that integrity, that's what we've built our business off. So it's scary, but it's also the reward at the same time.